Welcome back to the Gardening with Joy and Holly radio show. Thank you for being with us. Joel Karsten, author of the Straw Bale Garden book, moments away. But hey, do you have carpenter bees? Have you had carpenter bees? Rescue has a product in which will prevent those bees, mud daubers, and other flying insects from damaging your property.
Yeah, carpenter bees bore holes and tunnel into wood to lay eggs and care for their larvae. And these holes and tunnels and wood invite mold and rot into homes, decks, fences, and any other wood structures. Spring is the best time to catch carpenter bees before they mate. The trap stick can be used throughout the summer and early fall to continue to control those carpenter bees as well. Rescue makes a carpenter bee trap stick that is simple to use and pesticide free. You hang these from wood structures you want to protect. You can go to carpenterbeecontrol.com to watch a video about carpenter bees and learn how to prevent them with the trap stick from Rescue. Like all Rescue products, they're made in the USA, and you just go to rescue.com or carpenterbeecontrol.com for more information.
Holly, let's go to the hotline and bring in our guest for this week.
Joel Karsten has worked in the green industry for many years. He is the author and inventor of the Straw Bale Garden Method. He's also an avid vegetable gardener. Welcome to the program, Joel.
Oh, boy, you make me sound really great, Holly. I appreciate that. That's a great introduction. Thank you.
Well, we appreciate your time. You've been with us many times on the program, and you always enlighten us with new knowledge each and every time, and we appreciate that. So let's just get right into the questions here. We've got a lot of people, new gardeners, advanced gardeners, weekend warriors, who've done this for many years, or this is the first season, and they've never heard of straw bale gardening. Tell us where the ideal came from, and how did you come up with the straw bale gardening method? And we'll get into more of what that process is in a moment.
Sure. Yeah, I grew up on a farm, and as a young kid, we had a dairy farm, and we'd always have a busted bale of hay or bale of straw that would end up next to the barn. And 6 months would go by, or a year, and after a while, the biggest, tallest, healthiest, greenest thistles on the whole farm were the ones that would grow out of these decomposing bales that would lay by the barn. And even as a little kid, I would notice that. So now we fast forward about 15 years, and I graduate with a degree in horticulture, and I buy my first house, and it turns out I had 1 inch of topsoil at this property that I bought. And having grown up on a farm where there's 3 feet of sandy loam, you grow beautiful vegetables in that. But now I'm in this residential lot, and I have 1 inch of topsoil. I figured, well, there's no way I'm ever going to grow a garden in here. And then I was in another pickle because I was right out of college, and I just bought my first house, and I didn't have 2 nickels to rub together, not to mention, $300-$400 to build nice raised beds, which is what a normal gardener would do. But then I remembered those bales that used to lay by the barn years ago, and I thought, if thistles will grow out of those bales, then I bet you tomatoes and peppers would grow almost as well. So I started doing some experimenting, and it's coming up on 30 years ago already since I started the Straw Bale Gardens method. But basically, I monkeyed with it for the first couple of years. I determined right away, even that first season that I did it, that this was really an effective way to grow a vegetable garden. But it took me a little while to get it perfected, and then to come out with the actual method that I could teach other people. And now it's been coming up on 30 years, and we have straw bale gardeners now in 60 countries, in 30 different languages. We have our books translated in 30 languages, and it's just become a popular thing. People just love to do it. It's a really simple but very effective way to grow vegetables anywhere on any surface. So you can do this on asphalt or concrete or gravel, or if you've got a beautiful yard already, you could grow it out in your yard, or you could grow it on top of what used to be your traditional soil garden if you wanted to do it there. So it can go anywhere.
Well, just think of where the world would be at if after you graduated college and bought a house, and you would have had $400 to build raised beds. The amount of people that would not be able to be growing successfully bunches and pounds and hundreds of pounds of produce out of straw bales across the world.
It's very true. It's very true. I probably would never have come up with the idea if I'd had the money to build raised beds.
Greatest things come out of people with the least amount of money at some points, I guess.
That's right. That's what they always say. Necessity is the mother of invention. Right?
Yes.
So there you go.
Oh,
It's really become popular, and it's exciting to see what's happened. It's certainly become much bigger than me as an individual. It's kind of become almost a niche movement within the gardening industry.
And you're learning every day, people sending you information going, hey, this is what I done. And you're like, okay.
Yeah, right. I learned from a lot of people. I've taught them the basics, and a lot of people will take those basics that I've taught them and expand upon that for sure. I wrote a whole book about that. One of my books was called Straw Bale Solutions, and it was all about people all around the world who are using the straw bale gardens method to be able to grow vegetables in some area or in some situation in the world where their traditional soil and traditional gardening methods would not allow them to grow. So it's everything from, on the side of a mountain in Switzerland to, parts of Holland where it floods all the time in the spring. And without building, very expensive dikes and things around your gardens and having pumping systems and everything, people couldn't grow vegetable gardens because for 2 weeks in the spring, the water would come and flood 10 inches deep and it would kill everything in your garden. You have to start all over again. And with straw bale gardens, it gets it up in the air. So, you're 20 inches, 18, 20 inches on top of a bale, and the water can come in 10 inches deep on the bottom of that bale, and it doesn't affect your vegetables up on top. So, if it's only there for a short time, a week or 2 weeks, and the water dissipates and your garden continues to grow, and you end up with a beautiful garden. You didn't have to build any dikes or service any pumps or anything to be able to do it. So it's amazing what people come up with in all different parts of the world to be able to use this method.
that's definitely amazing. Now, with the method, do people just, you see a lot of stuff like just put your plants directly in the bale, and obviously that's not correct. You had to do
Right.
some research and trial and error to make this work.
Yeah, that's the thing. It's elusive because if you drove by a straw bale garden, that's what it would look like. It would look like somebody just planted their tomatoes and peppers right into a bale of straw in the front yard. And what's really happening is we're not planting it into straw bales. We're planting those things into recently decomposed straw. So what we need to do before we ever plant is we need to condition the straw. And really what that means is sort of insider lingo for decompose or compost the straw bale. I don't call it composting because there's a connotation to composting that tells people that they should go in and turn the compost with a pitchfork or a shovel or something. And we never turn this. This is like a static compost inside the bale. So what we do in order to make that happen is we add a source of nitrogen to the bale and we add some water, not a lot of water, but just enough to kind of get the bacteria hydrated inside the bale. And then bacteria will do most of this work for us. There's also other decomposers like insects and worms, which you'll see. You'll see some fungi, maybe some mushrooms will grow on the bales. You might see some mold growing on the bales. And then the heavy lifter of all of them you can't see, and that's bacteria because it's microscopic. You got to have a 400 power microscope to even see one of these things. But they're what does the majority of decomposition work. And we feed them a little nitrogen, we give them a little water, and they'll colonize the inside of that bale. And often when they're colonizing, you'll see the bales will get hot, will get warm during that period of time. So it doesn't take very long. It takes about 12 days to get the bales ready. And at the end of that time, the bales will have probably gotten warm, pretty warm. Sometimes they'll get hot, even 150 degrees. Then they cool off. And by that 12th day, you'll be ready to plant your vegetable garden. So this isn't something you need to plan, 4 months in advance or anything. You can go and buy a straw bale, or you can make a bale yourself. I tell people all the time, if you don't have money to go buy a straw bale, if you have grass clippings and leaves, you can make a bale, believe it or not. We talk about how to do this on our website. We have videos about how to do this, and I also talk about it in my book. But it's real simple. You just put it in a Rubbermaid tub, one of those great big storage containers, dump all your Christmas ornaments out and bring that tub outside, fill it up with leaves and grass, and then wet it down, water it down overnight, and then dump that brick of leaves and grass out and then wrap it with chicken wire, real tightly with chicken wire. And then you can use that as a straw bale. We just pretend it's a straw bale. But you can do these out of anything because anything that will decompose will become soil. And that's the ticket. When we're planting into this straw bale, we're not planting into straw. We're planting into decomposed straw, which is really biologically early stage soil inside the bale.
Now, you spoke about using fertilizer. Now, you have a product called Bale Buster. Disclaimer, Joel Karsten is a sponsor of our program. You'll hear the ad throughout the program. What is the difference between the Bale Buster material product than a traditional fertilizer?
Well, we formulated the Bale Buster very specifically for straw bale gardening. So it's got the right amount of nitrogen. It actually has a little phosphorus and potassium in with it, enough to get the plant started until the bale starts to decompose and really provides nutrients. And then it also has two things in it that you won't find in anything else. One is Trichoderma ricci, which is a type of fungi that's synergistic with vegetable roots. So it helps the vegetable roots increase their ability to absorb nutrients better. And also we put in there spores, about 250 million spores of Bacillus subtilis. And that's a decomposer bacteria. So we have 250 million spores of Trichoderma and 250 million spores of Bacillus bacteria in every box of Bale Buster that we send out. So we have an organic version and we have a traditional version. Our traditional version does 20 bales in a box, and the organic version, unfortunately, only does 5 bales because it's not as strong. It's organic, so you got to use a little bit more in order to get the same effect. But it's very cost competitive. We're actually we're working really hard to get into retail. So at some point we might have it available in retail. But right now you have to go to our website, which is real easy to get to, strawbalegardenclub.com, or you just go directly to balebuster.com and that'll get you right to our store.
And people may think 5 bales or 20 bales. That seems like a lot. And to a first-time straw bale gardener, that might be, but you have people that literally do hundreds and hundreds of straw bales each and every year.
Yeah. Yeah, I have a guy who does over 1,000 bales every year. So yeah, he does, a pick your own vegetable plot. He does it all in bales. So yeah, I've actually had a lady in Tennessee a few years ago that did 3,000 bales in her straw bale garden. So, if you have access to bales and can do it on a mass scale, it's a great way, once your bales are used up, so you're going to use them usually for a year, maybe 2 years, and then they kind of get decomposed. So you get this beautiful compost. So if you need to do any soil modification to improve your existing soils, this is a great way to do that. You can garden in bales over top of your soil and then use this generous amount of compost that you're creating to till into your traditional soil and help modify that and make it better for gardening as well. So even if it's a short-term fix for a couple of years, people like to use it.
Definitely. Now, a concern about using bales is them possibly being sprayed with pesticides. If somebody has this concern, what would they have to know?
Yeah, I talk to people about this every once in a while, and they ask about, should I buy organic straw bales? And I say, if you're an organic gardener and you wanted to sell the vegetables that you grow out of your garden as organic, then you would need to make sure that the straw you're gardening in is certified organic. But if you're not concerned about that, there is always a remote concern about using persistent herbicides. That's really the pesticide that we're worried about here, is herbicide or weed killer. But I can tell you, in all my years of doing this, I've never run into a case where someone had this happen in their straw bale garden, where they got a amino rallet or cloppy rallet or something like that herbicide in their bales. And I think this is one of the reasons, is because all herbicides, complex herbicides, are made from hydrocarbon chains, complex hydrocarbon chains. And one of the main foods that bacteria eats is carbon. So even if there were some residue inside of a bale, as soon as it colonizes with bacteria, the bacteria treats that hydrocarbon as a food source and literally goes in and metabolizes that food source and renders that hydrocarbon chain inert. So really it literally breaks it down into both carbon and hydrogen. And of course, hydrogen is gas, so it releases that gas into the atmosphere. Now, there may be a situation where if you had a hay bale, first of all, the bad herbicides that we're worried about are not even labeled for use on straw. They're really only labeled for use on hay. But we do get people once in a while that will use a hay bale for their straw bale garden, which is okay. They can do that. It tends to decompose very quickly versus straw. Straw tends to last for a good 2 seasons, where hay decomposes more quickly. So that would really be the only time I would ever be concerned, is if I had a hay bale. And you also got to remember that these farmers are very strict. Most of them are very strict about following the labels on these chemicals, because if they don't follow the labels, they can't buy the chemicals anymore because they'll lose their license. And believe it or not, you can go to prison if you don't follow these labels. So they're pretty strict usually. Now, you might get somebody who just spaced it off or didn't read the label thoroughly, or, I don't think anybody would do it criminally, because it just wouldn't be worth it. I mean, selling a bale of hay for $8 or $10 is not worth going to prison for a year. So I don't think anybody would do that. But if they did, and you happen to get that bale, and you happen to plant your straw bale garden in it, your vegetables would come out all contorted and misshapen, and you really would never be able to harvest anything off of that bale anyway. So that would be sort of worst case scenario. And then if that happened, I would tell somebody to thoroughly finish composting that bale in order to get rid of the rest of any of those hydrocarbon chains that might be in it. And what's really funny is if you contact the chemical companies that make these persistent herbicides, they'll tell you that the way to get rid of these persistent herbicides is to thoroughly compost any organic matter that they're spread on. So it would be exactly what we're doing, which is composting these bales. So I'm not saying it's not a concern at all, but it should be a very limited concern for people that want to do this. I mean, if you go to the grocery store and pick any piece of fruit off or any vegetable or produce off of the shelf at a grocery store, you have a lot better chance of getting a mouthful of pesticides there than you would if you grew it yourself in your own straw bale garden. So
nature. Yeah. Well, Joe, we greatly appreciate the time you've offered us to us. How can people find your books, some videos, learn more about the straw bale gardening method?
Sure. I am everywhere online, but the best place to find everything in one place is at strawbalegardenclub.com. It says club, but you can get a membership there for free. So it's pretty easy to get there. We have over 100 videos about straw bale gardening on our website, and lots of blog entries and a forum where people can ask questions. And of course, there's links to everything. And if people want to buy books or buy Bale Buster, they can buy it from that site as well. So I really appreciate you guys having me on. I love coming on your show, and I always get great response. People love your show and did it.
Absolutely. We thank you for taking time out of your day to join Holly and myself and educate all of our listeners across the country.
For more information, please visit thewisconsinvegetablegardener.com.